Wanna go out sometime?
You want to go on a date with me?
If you're feeling bad about how your social life is, and I know I am, take pride in the fact that at least it's nowhere near as tumultuous as that of Scott Pilgrim. And if it is, click off right now, take care of that, please, for your own good. I'm Kristijan with Wicked Binge, and these are Scott Pilgrim takes off relationships, healthy to toxic. Spoilers ahead, of course. Now let's jump into the healthy relationships. The gold medal of health was a tricky one this time around, but we're giving it to the unexpected bond between Steven Stills and Knives Chow. Sure, her quote-unquote romance with Scott didn't last long, but it introduced Knives to some good friends in his band. Her dynamic with Steven is sweeter than you might expect. When Kim discovers some musical talent within Knives, Steven takes her under his wing, and the two are practically inseparable from then on. Their musical inspiration is so in sync that they sometimes can't help but just start jamming out even in more serious scenarios. On that note, Steven can be brotherly towards Knives too. When he senses that she's upset about Ramona having been Scott's cheating partner, Steven comforts Knives while also encouraging her to let bygones be bygones.
Right. Let's go see Ramona.
It's a wholesome friendship, and hopefully this duo will stick together. Keeping with the band, next up is the relationship between the members of Sex Bob-omb: Steven, Kim, Scott, Young Neil, and Knives. It takes good synchronization to form a proper band, and while Steven, Kim, Scott, Neil, and eventually Knives all have their own opinions on how much they do or do not suck,
There's only one way to find out if we suck, and that's by playing.
you can bet they'll stick together through anything.
Wouldn't count on it.
There's a certain respect between all of them, from Steven and Knives seeking Neil's creative genius for their musical, to Kim taking Knives under her wing for a jam session to get her out of a funk. Now we have to give a quick mention to the friendship between Young Neil and Ramona too. Being the ditzy, laid-back guy he is, Young Neil doesn't have a lot of deeply fleshed out connections in the series, but whenever he and Ramona interact, they get along pretty darn well.
Basically, yeah.
Neil gives her a tour of his movie studio despite her not having permission to be there, and Ramona shows him genuine appreciation and acceptance in return.
Oh, wow. I was wondering.
Not much to say, if really anything. It's a testament of Young Neil being built different in terms of friendship. This next entry might be a little surprising, but we have to give it to Wallace and Scott's friendship. And full disclosure, pretty much all the credit for this honor goes to Wallace. He's always there for Scott, teasing aside, from going to his concerts despite having no personal desire to do so, to letting him perpetually crash at his place for years. Wallace cares a lot more than he lets on at first.
How long could it take?
The why is a mystery, but Wallace is a good friend, only held back by the fact that Scott is definitely taking advantage of his kindness. But enough of all these protagonists. Luke and Gordon's bromance proves that the bad guys can have healthy bonds too. While most of the other evil exes aren't too fond of Gordon's self-centeredness, he and Luke end up becoming good buddies once they both lose everything.
Friendship!
In just 90 minutes, they become besties who skateboard, start anime from season 12, play paintball, and more, all indoors? All else aside, it takes a special bond to have an itinerary that wild. Staying on topic with the league, X's 1 through 6 all have a pretty good support system. They're all on board with Matthew's mutiny against G-Man, and most of the time, they seem pretty friendly with one another in general. They may have collectively lost a girlfriend, but they found a family, kind of. This is probably going to be controversial, but rounding out the healthy relationships is the show's main attraction, Scott and Ramona. To some, it may seem only natural to call their romance healthy. To others, it could be outright blasphemy. Here's how we see it, though. Scott and Ramona are two people who both have their own flaws and struggles when it comes to relationships. That much is obvious. They hurt others often, and it takes meeting someone as messed up as themselves to finally understand that and start changing for the better.
We don't have to talk about our pasts. It's my least favorite subject.
If nothing else, they're fighting for one another, and given both of their tendencies to run away from their problems for the sake of convenience, we're gonna place them just inside of the healthy territory, for now. It's time to move on to more volatile territory. These are the questionable relationships. Gordon and Julie might both be, well, absolutely insane, but they're also insane for each other. In a twist that nobody could have seen coming, for good reason, Gideon Graves was actually the weird kid from Julie's high school, Gordon Goose. Well, that's not the unexpected part. That would be the fact that Julie actually shows a capacity for human compassion, letting Gordon come in and crash with her.
Get your butt in here.
The two end up getting together, bonding over their love of revenge, and honestly, the fact that Julie had any patience with someone at all is major by her standards.
I'll miss you! I'll miss you f***ing more!
Moving back to the Scott is bad at relationships topic, next up is the relationship between Knives and Scott. The fact that Scott is an early 20s guy dating a 17-year-old girl should be enough to knock them down even lower on its own, and that's not even mentioning the fact that Scott is only dating Knives to get over his ex, Envy Adams. But what saves them from a lower point is that Knives forgives Scott pretty quickly once he apologizes.
So, thanks.
They're even in the same band going forward, making for an amicable split. Now for a fully platonic relationship, the friendship between Julie and Ramona. These two seem to consider each other good confidants, whether that's for gossip or actually important issues. The fact that Ramona was able to honestly talk to Julie about her concerns over Scott being kidnapped without being shouted at is a testament to the fact that they sincerely trust each other, even when that trust is called into question. On the more unlikely end of friendships is that of Knives and Ramona. Understandably, there's bad blood between these two at first. Knives blames Ramona for Scott's death, since Matthew Patel was her ex after all, but they seem to have smoothed things over by the end. Knives helps Ramona track down Scott, so they're at least able to be cordial, and since Ramona is part of the friend group by the end of the movie, we can assume things are chill between them. At the very end of the gray area is the onset fling between Wallace and Todd. Wallace might be a great friend, but if you're looking for romance with him, you'd best make sure you know what you're getting into, especially if you're running lines in the trailer thinking you found a connection only to be callously told that it's just a temporary fling. There, Todd. You'll find someone one day. And I guess envy's out of the question. At least count yourself lucky that you didn't end up in the final section of our list. The toxic relationships. We've talked about platonic friendships, but what about platonic enemy ships? I don't know. Up next is Scott and Julie. Honestly, there's not too much to explain here. Julie hates Scott. Is that understandable? Yeah.
And why would they get my hopes up by making it seem like he was dead?
Is it maybe a little much to be sincerely disappointed that he isn't dead? Also, yeah, Scott doesn't seem to have much against Julie, but he understandably keeps his distance from her regardless. Smart move, honestly. Landing barely outside of the bottom three is the fragmented relationship between Scott Pilgrim and Envy Adams. The fact that Scott was thrust into a deep depression for years after Envy left him is enough indication that she was absolutely brutal in that breakup. Like young Neil said, imagine dating someone, getting dumped, and seeing them become a celebrity, like a massive celebrity. A celebrity who's fully willing to take over your funeral as their own publicity stunt, no less. Speaking of bitter breakups, though, it's time to return to the League of Evil Exes. Next up is the relationship between Gideon Graves and all of the other evil exes. Matthew Patel manages to express the fact that Gideon has been using all of them to get Ramona for himself, never once planning for any of them to be compensated for their hard work. At that point, it's hard to blame Matthew for taking his empire for himself.
Still think I'm a loser?
It might seem like they're made up by the end since Matthew gave Gordon back his CEO position, but nah, those evil laughing shadows are definitely saying there's more going on under the surface. Our runner-up for the most toxic relationship is a 7-way tie, that between Ramona and her exes. Look, we could go through each and every one of these relationships and pick apart everything each party did wrong, or we could tell the most crucial part like it is.
Ramona Flowers.
That Ramona broke these 7 people's hearts so badly that they made a whole anime villain team to get her back. It's practically made for the gold medal of toxicity, but if you've watched the show, you might know of one breakup that's even worse. The most toxic relationship in Scott Pilgrim Takes Off has to be that between future Scott and future Ramona. When we talked about Scott and Ramona earlier, remember how we mentioned that they had their own problems with relationships? Scott lacks accountability and Ramona always runs away. This leads to, respectively, a tendency to blame everyone but himself for his problems and a tendency to run farther and farther from her past. Now, take those flaws and multiply them by about 50, and you have this absolute disaster. Future Scott was so horrendous about the divorce between him and Ramona that he literally went back in time to kidnap himself and fake his own death so he wouldn't date her. It's one thing to ghost someone, but to try and convince them that you're a ghost, that your past self is a dead, that's a new one, man.